The history of special education in the United States. Discuss the history and the major court cases that led to our current system, include the Rehabilitation Act, IDEA, ADA, and what a least restrictive environment means. So, the history of special education in the United States is marked by significant legislation milestones and court cases aimed at ensuring equitable access to education for students with disabilities. The first of these is Public Law 94 142, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, now known as IDEA. This landmark legislation mandated that all children with disabilities have access to free and appropriate public education, FAPE, tailored to the individual's needs. It also introduced the concept of the Individualized Education Program, or IEP, to outline specific educational goals and services for each student with a disability. The second is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504 of this act prohibited discrimination on the basis of disability in programs and activities receiving federal funding. It laid the groundwork for future disability rights legislation, including the provision of accommodations and services for students with disabilities. The third is Park versus Pennsylvania of 1972. This case established the right of children with intellectual disabilities to a free and appropriate education. This was a crucial precursor to the passage of Public Law 94 142. The fourth is Mills versus the Board of Education of 1972. In this case, the court ruled that students with disabilities cannot be excluded from public education solely due to their disability. It emphasized the importance of providing educational services to all children, regardless of their disabilities. The fifth is the Board of Education and the Hendrick Hudson Central School District versus Raleigh case of 1982. This Supreme Court case established the standard for determining whether a school district has provided free access to public education under IDEA. The court held that FAPE does not require students to maximize the potential of students with disabilities, but rather to provide them with access to an education that is reasonably calculated to confer with educational benefit. The sixth is the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA of 1990. This landmark civil rights legislation prohibited discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including education, employment, transportation, and public accommodations. It further reinforced the rights of students with disabilities to access educational opportunities on an equal basis with their peers. Seventh is the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, of 1997. This reauthorization strengthened the emphasis on including students with disabilities in general education classrooms to maximize to the maximum, extent appropriate, also known as the principle of the least restrictive environment, LRE. IDEA mandates that students with disabilities be educated alongside their non disabled peers to the greatest extent possible while still receiving necessary supports and services. The principle of the least restrictive environment, LRE, emphasizes that students with disabilities should be educated in settings that are as close to the general education environment as possible while still meeting their individual needs. This means that schools must consider placing students with disabilities in general ed classrooms alongside their non disabled peers before considering more restrictive placement options, such as separate special education classrooms or schools. LREs, or least restrictive environments, are a fundamental component of the IDEA and reflects a commitment to inclusion and equality in education for students with disabilities.